Hello friends, I am Arpit and I am here with today's analysis. Today is 3rd of January and we're going to deal with three very important topics which are in news. The first topic, free movement regime with Myanmar to end. The free movement regime was started in the 1970s by mutual agreement of both the governments of India and Myanmar. It allows free passage to the hilly tribal people who are living in the border areas. These people are allowed to move freely 16 kilometers within the territory of India and 16 kilometers within the territory of Myanmar. This was given to facilitate the already existing deep ethnic and marital ties among those tribal communities. But now, due to certain factors like increased illegal migration from Myanmar and support to anti-India activities from Myanmar, the government has decided to stop this. The next is the global nuclear order. The global nuclear order was established after the Cuban Missile Crisis, which happened in 1962. This led to an understanding between the two superpowers of that time, that is USA and USSR, that usage of nuclear weapons can be harmful. In this context, various treaties like the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty was signed and the Nuclear Suppliers Group was formed. But this global nuclear order, which was largely successful, is now under doldrums because of the changing multipolarity. China, which has emerged as a new power, Russia, which is already there, at an all-time low, the relations are between Russia and the West. Now, USA faces this nuclear threat from these two superpowers. Plus, the I would say multilateral treaties and bilateral treaties which aimed at controlling proliferation of nuclear weapons, they are also fading away. So these are the reasons. The next is the Citizenship Amendment Act rules to be notified. This act was passed in 2019, which aimed to expedite the citizenship procedures for the Hindus, Sikhs, Christians, Jains, Buddhists, Parsis from Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh to get Indian citizenship. This bill was criticized heavily for being religious in nature. However, the government of India, while replying to this allegation, clearly stated that this is not religious, but this is tackling the religious atrocities, or I would say religion based atrocities to the people in these countries which are non secular. And we are just accommodating these people. So the rules will be notified and this will be implemented henceforth. So these are the three topics which we will be covering. The first topic, that is free movement regime with Myanmar to end. Now, as you can see, the India-Myanmar border, roughly 1650 kilometers it is. States like Mizoram, Manipur, Nagaland and Arunachal Pradesh share a boundary with Myanmar. Now, this free movement regime was basically 16 kilometers. Obviously, this line which I am drawing is not up to scale, but yes, for understanding purpose it is. And 16 kilometers into Myanmar. This 32 kilometer stretch was a stretch for free movement for those people who were residing here, labeled as the hilly tribes. But this particular, I would say, issue has led to a lot of problems. Problems like some support by the anti-India elements for anti-India activities here in India. Like for example, in Manipur violence last year, there was a lot of logistical support provided by people across the border. China is claimed was also their part of this, and influx of lot of illegal migrants from Myanmar into India after Myanmar was under the military junta rule. Probably these are the two identified reasons why this free movement regime is going to end. So, free movement regime with Myanmar to end soon as per the reports of the government of India. What is it? Tribal groups living up to 16 kilometers on both sides of the border are allowed to move freely since they have deep ethnic and marital ties with each other. Now, since when is this arrangement in place? 1970s it was there in place and it was revised in 2016 as well. Can there be any resistance from India or from Indian states? Yes, it is anticipated that resistance will be from the states like Nagaland and Mizoram, because in these two places a lot of, I would say, ties are there. Nagaland and Mizoram, these two states. Do states have a say in this? Even if they show resistance, do they have a say in this? Actually, no. Border security is center's domain. Center may take note of the concerns of the states, but the final decision is of the union government. Now, during COVID, there was such a constraint, or there was such, I would say, a concern by state government of Manipur. So the state governments can suspend FMR in their respective states on reasonable grounds, but this has to be approved by the central government. The Manipur government has suspended FMR regime since 2020 following the COVID-19 pandemic. So you might be wondering, sir, you just thought the free movement regime was impacting the Manipur crisis. Actually, passage directly to Manipur was restricted, because here the FMR was restricted, but to Mizoram it was not, to Nagaland it was not, and from Nagaland and Manipur, these people came in, or from Mizoram, these people came into Manipur. So it was like this. Now, are the arrangements under FMR, how are they? Under FMR, every member of the hill tribes who is either a citizen of India or citizen of Myanmar and who resides within 16 kilometers on either side of the border can cross the border on production of a border pass. This border pass is valid for a year and can stay for up to 2 weeks per visit. Then after 1 year passes, this border pass can be renewed. Why is the government taking such a step? The two probable reasons which we've already discussed, but yes, influx of refugees in Myanmar, this is basically first reason. After a military coup in Myanmar in February 2021, over 40,000 refugees took shelter in Mizoram and around 4,000 refugees are said to have entered Manipur. Now, one more thing is happening. Some, I would say, anti-military groups are there which are, fighting against the military over there, and some members affiliated to the military, they are coming into India. This is also happening. We covered this topic somewhere in October, November. Then support to people involved in anti-India activities. Manipur CM in September 2023 urged the government of India to curb the FMR entirely due to support extended to protesters in Manipur from across the border. This played a crucial role in flaring up the situation in Manipur. So, these probably are the two reasons. However, officially the government has not declared, but yes, quite understandable, commonsensical that these are the two reasons why FMR is going to end and we are going to see a border built up over there. Visas will be required for anyone to cross the border. Next is the global nuclear order. Nuclear weapons have been used only once in the, I would say, human history. 1945, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. USA was the first one to develop nuclear weapons and the first one to use it. First and the only one to use it probably. So, after that, there was one incident where, there were chances of the nuclear weapons being used. The situation was so intense that the two world superpowers, USSR and USA, they came very close. This was the time of Cold War, but that Cold War was about to be converted into a hot war. And that was the Cuban Missile Crisis. And after the Cuban Missile Crisis, the world leaders, basically the President of USA, Mr. John F. Kennedy, and the General Secretary Nikita Khrushchev of USSR understood the importance of, I would say, nuclear weapons not to be used, because humanity will be at, I would say, a lot of risk. So, at that time, this global nuclear order came into place after this 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. Now, what was Cuban Missile Crisis? Let's suppose this is USA. Here is a small island country, Cuba, which was more inclined towards socialism. And this inclination of Cuba towards socialism got hold of USSR's attention, and USSR started planting missiles over here in Cuba. That time, missiles were not intercontinental ballistic missiles which had the range of 5,000 kilometers or so. The missile range was very less, so we needed, regions in proximity to fire the missiles. So Cuba was in proximity of USA. USSR started building up missiles over here so that if need be, they could launch them in USA. USA came to know about the incident, and USA and USSR, they were at loggerheads with each other in the Atlantic Ocean over here. So this was that Cuban Missile Crisis where both of them almost came close. But after that, the two nuclear superpowers needed bilateral mechanisms to prevent tensions from escalating to the nuclear level. Nuclear weapons are dangerous and therefore their spread should be curbed. This was the understanding developed by these two leaders, Nikita Khrushchev and US President John F. Kennedy. The convergence created the global nuclear order. Now, the best part was that both the leaders were understanding that nuclear weapons usage could create a lot of havoc and damage all across the world, which is something uncalled for. The nuclear weapons once used in Japan till date, yes, that is 2024, Hiroshima and Nagasaki are facing the brunt of that. Such disastrous was the impact of usage of nuclear weapons. But, global nuclear order being established was just the beginning. After that, a lot of things started to happen in the aftermath of the Cuban crisis. First was this nuclear non-proliferation treaty was signed. This nuclear non-proliferation treaty actually called for stopping the proliferation of nuclear weapons, where 5 countries, the permanent 5, that is USA, UK, France, Russia and China, did an agreement with the world countries, and according to that agreement, these 5 countries are allowed to have nuclear weapons and the others are not allowed to have. Now, when this nuclear non-proliferation treaty was signed, it had only 60 parties, but now it has around 191 parties. Means 191 includes these 5 also. So 191 minus 5, 186 countries adhere to the fact that we are not going to have nuclear weapons. You can have. You 5 countries can have. Did India sign NPT? No, India did not sign NPT. India has not signed NPT. Because India clearly said that we live in a very hostile neighborhood. So, this is there. This nuclear non-proliferation treaty was signed for initially 25 years. 1968 it was signed. 1970 it was adopted or enforced. It came into existence for 25 years. In 1995 it was expiring. So, in 1995 again these leaders met and extended it for indefinite period from 1995 onwards. The treaty is the cornerstone of nuclear non-proliferation throughout the world because this treaty has successfully enabled horizontal, or I would say curbed horizontal spread of nuclear weapons. It has not allowed nuclear weapons to be owned by many countries in the world. These 5 countries own. Apart from these 5 countries, only 4 more countries own. Israel, India, Pakistan and North Korea. So in total, 9 countries have nuclear weapons today. This can be considered as the success of nuclear non-proliferation treaty. The London Club and nuclear suppliers do. Now, 1970, this nuclear non-proliferation treaty came into, picture. 1974, 4 years down the line, India conducted its first nuclear test. And when India conducted its first nuclear test, there were ripples all across the world. Countries like USA, USSR, UK, Canada, France, Japan and West Germany, they held a series of meetings in London. This loosely came to be known as the London Club. What was the objective of their meeting, or what was the outcome of these meetings? They concluded an ad hoc export controls mechanism. Now, see, in nuclear bombs, nuclear fuel is used, that is uranium. Nuclear fuel, uranium, is basically having dual usage. One is military usage if it is enriched to more than 95%, it can be used as a bomb. And the other is civilian usage or peaceful usage, it is called as. It can be used for medicine, treating cancers and all. It can be used for generating electricity, nuclear power plants. So this uranium or nuclear fuel is considered as a dual usage good. What if this dual usage good is not available to countries? They will not think of enriching it and making it for military purpose. So this London club, which later got converted into the nuclear suppliers group, was aiming to basically form guidelines for exporting nuclear and related dual use materials, equipments and technologies. So this trade of nuclear technologies, nuclear fuels, even if for peaceful purposes it was there, it was regulated heavily by the nuclear suppliers group. So less availability of these dual usage goods would lead to less proliferation. This was the main idea. Now the big question is that is the global nuclear order successful? Well, if I see the first 2 points over here, humanity has survived 75 years of nuclear age without blowing itself up. Means that nuclear weapons have been used only once in 1945 and after that it has not been used. Although people are having nuclear weapons, but it has not been used. Since this is there, the fact is there that it has not been used, we can call it successful. Second is non-proliferation has been a success. Why it has been a success? Because, first of all, it was extended indefinitely in 1995, restricted the number of countries with nuclear weapons to 9. 5 are already there in NPT. Apart from 5, 4 non-signatory countries are only there. So this is one such success. Second is, even after the Cold War ended, and it ended in 1991, non-proliferation remained a shared objective between Russia and USA. Basically, both of these countries ensured that countries like Belarus, Ukraine and Kazakhstan, all these were part of Soviet Union. These countries, when Soviet Union disintegrated, had some of nuclear weapons which were also denuclearized. So these countries, despite having gained some of the nuclear weapons, as I would say they were part of the erstwhile USSR, because USSR was possessing nuclear weapons. When these countries became independent countries, individual countries, they gave up nuclear weapons. This is one such, I would say, point which you need to know. So this actually made nuclear non-proliferation successful, the global nuclear order successful. On the other hand, GNO had not performed well because the nuclear arsenals of USA and Russia all kept on increasing. Means horizontal spread was contained, but the vertical spread means the countries which were already having, those 5 countries, particularly USA and Russia, their nuclear arsenals kept on increasing. There was not a stop over there. The proliferation did not stop at vertical level, although it had stopped at the horizontal level. So this was the situation. The changing geopolitics and GNO. Now the global nuclear order is faced with a new, I would say, challenge, that is the changing geopolitics. The world at that time during the Cold War era was bipolar. When the Cold War ended, the world became unipolar. It was USA's hegemony, and slowly and gradually in the 21st century we had a multipolar world. Multipolar world where multiple poles are there, and one of the prominent poles is China. Now, China is considered to be one of the biggest rivals of USA presently. And this rivalry is very much different from the rivalry of the Cold War era which USA had with USSR. How it is different? First, because we live in a globalized world. The trade between USA and China is so high, it is more than $600 billion. There is a lot of interdependency among these both countries. Apart from it, China is technologically very advanced as compared to the erstwhile USSR. USSR did not focus on technological advancements and all, but China is focusing on that. China is also focusing on expanding its naval presence. The South China Sea fiasco, we know that. So this is basically the difference. This is the change in geopolitics where we have an assertive China. This rivalry is different from the Cold War because both economies are closely intertwined. China is an economic and technological peer rival. China has resented the US's naval presence in the South China Sea, East China Sea, and has steadily built up its naval and missile capabilities. Now, impact of changing geopolitics on bilateral and multilateral treaties. What is the impact? Now, there had been multiple bilateral treaties between Russia and USA. Those treaties were aiming either at increasing transparency that these both countries declare their nuclear arsenals to each other, and they were also aiming at curbing the vertical proliferation of nuclear weapons. But many of these treaties now are non-existent. Like for example, in 2002, the US withdrew from the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. In 2019, from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty on grounds that Russia was violating it. The only remaining treaty is the New START Treaty, which will lapse in 2026, and Russia has clearly stated that we are not going to renew it in the present ongoing Russia-Ukraine crisis. Strategic stability talks, they began in 2021 following the Geneva meeting between Presidents Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin. But these talks have also collapsed because of the Russia-Ukraine war. In 2023, Russia de-ratified or revoked the ratification of Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty and said that it wants to be at par with USA because USA has also signed the CTBT but not ratified it. So Russia in 2000 signed and ratified that treaty, but now said that we'll be a signatory, but we will de-ratify this. This was also covered in the month of November. Are other non-nuclear countries wanting to adopt nuclear weapons? Now, if this is the case, then the global nuclear order completely is a failure. But yes, we have three countries into picture. One is South Korea, second is Japan, and the third is Taiwan. Let us look at them case by case. The first is South Korea. During the 1970s, South Korea began to actively consider a nuclear weapons program, spurred by the US withdrawal from Vietnam. But, it was not allowed. France was ready to, supply this technology also to South Koreans. But France was pressurized by USA not to do so. South Korea was pressurized to join or to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. A recent survey in South Korea, opinion polls indicate 70% support for developing a national nuclear deterrent, 40% for reintroducing US nuclear weapons withdrawn in 1991 on its territory. Why they are thinking so? Because their arch rival, North Korea, is having nuclear weapons, which is in their vicinity as well. Second is Japan. Now, Japan is one such country which has faced the brunt of nuclear weapons. They know that what facing, the aftermath of nuclear weapons is like. But even if a country like Japan is thinking, then there is something, I would say, very serious. Now, a nuclear victim, Japanese public retains a strong anti-nuclear sentiment. But there is a shift visible in Japan's decision to double its defense spending over the next 5 years. And what if a proportion of its defense spending is for developing the nuclear, I would say, warheads? Taiwan. It is basically in the vicinity of China. With technological competence, Taiwan would also aspire for a long-standing aspiration to have nuclear weapons. They are also, since long, they are wanting to have nuclear weapons. And you know what? In the 70s and 80s, when USA was growing its proximity with China, USA pressurized Taiwan not to develop nuclear weapons. At that time also, Taiwan wanted to develop. And at that time, USA pressurized Taiwan not to develop. But now, the equations have changed. The arch rival is China. And to contain China, what if all these three countries which are in Asia, in the vicinity of China, want to develop their nuclear arsenals? This will definitely benefit USA. So that is, if the case will be, then the global nuclear order, which was largely considered to be successful, will be a big question mark. Do these countries have the technological competence to create nuclear weapons? Definitely All of them have. All of them. Means all three of them have. Now, is USA the protector? No. Actually, during the Cold War, USA's nuclear umbrella tied its European allies closer. Today, domestic compulsions in USA are turning US inwards, raising questions in the minds of its allies about its extended deterrence guarantees, especially in East Asia. Now, USA had extended these guarantees in East Asia, like in Japan or South Korea, that if someone fires you with a nuclear weapon, we are going to respond to that country on your behalf. This was kind of the extended deterrence guarantees given by USA to these East Asian countries. But now the domestic compulsions in USA are making USA to look inwards more and more as compared to outwards. Now these countries, they are becoming insecure that what if USA does not respond? Should we have our own nuclear program? So that is what is basically happening. Japan, South Korea and Taiwan have the technical capabilities to develop an independent nuclear deterrent program. Within a short time they can do it. So, this feeling among these countries is because they want to be more independent nuclear deterrent capabilities. Maybe the best way to handle the rivalry with China this will be. And this will be in USA's favor as well, because now the arch rival is China. If this happens, then the global nuclear order established after the Cuban Missile Crisis is going to be a big, I would say, question mark. So it is going to be shaky. Next is the Citizenship Amendment Act rules to be notified. Now this law was passed way back in 2019. The rules were not notified. The central government had been procrastinating on this particular aspect. I would say 8 rounds of negotiations or 8 extensions the government of India seeked, and now finally the government is ready to notify the rules. Once the rules are notified, then only this act will be implemented. So the Citizenship Amendment Act rules are to be notified by the government. When was the Amendment Act passed? It was 2019. But after the passage of the law, rules were not notified. The central government had taken 8 extensions to notify the rules. What are the major provisions of this Amendment Act? The Act seeks to fast track granting citizenship rights to Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, Sikhs, Parsis and Christians of Afghanistan, Pakistan and Bangladesh. And this particular provision of this act became highly controversial, which attracted or which flared into or which resulted into multiple protests all across the country. This bill was being labelled as anti-Muslim bill. This bill was being labelled as non-secular because it was targeting a particular religious community by excluding the Muslims. So this bill was in question because of these things. What made it so controversial? It was being contested that the law was being biased against the Muslims and a big question mark on our secular nature. Some sections like Tibetan Buddhists of China, Tamils of Sri Lanka and Rohingyas of Myanmar have not been included in this bill. This was the second such contention. Now, what has been the government of India's response on these, claims? Government of India clearly has stated that it was not on the basis of religion, but on the basis of religious discrimination the people faced in those countries. Those 3 countries like Afghanistan, Pakistan and Bangladesh. These 3 countries are those countries which are having a state religion, means those are non-secular countries. And these communities, Hindus, Sikhs, Christians, Jains, Buddhists, are religious minorities over there. Their interests are not, met over there, and that is why we are wanting to accommodate their interests. Sri Lanka, China and all, they were not included because they have not declared them to be a non-secular country. So it is like this. Also, it read that the Indian Parliament cannot be expected to take note of persecutions that may be taking place across various countries in the world. We are not going to take responsibility of any persecutions and accommodate those citizens in India. This was the response by Government of India in a counter affidavit filed by the government. So this was the controversy. Let the rules come. When the rules will come, I will again cover them in detail. But as of now, to lay the background, this is the, I would say, the foundation of that bill, the controversy connected to that bill, which we should know. And with this, today's session has come to an end. I will be meeting you tomorrow now with more such informative news pieces. Till then, you guys keep studying, keep reading, keep writing, and most importantly, keep revising. Namaste. Jai Hind.